you ever felt.
Are you listening? Damn.
Years ago, I found that different tribes and different people have different ways of pronouncing my surname. From those who come fairly close to it and those who completely obliterate it. So the Afrikaners pronounce the J as a Y. So they go like Eula. So I always say to the Afrikaans folks, how do you pronounce Japan? It would be Japan. So I could make a nice statement about that. You know, you could be yumping for yoi in Japan. I guess there are some things that are meant to be just pronounced outside of our cultural context. Having said that, one of the key things with understanding a marketplace is firstly, especially when you want to look at it from a future perspective, is firstly to understand what the marketplace is now. By clearly interpreting the things that are happening around us and things that have happened in the past, it gives us a good basis to be able to understand the trajectory of things in the future and obviously what that means from a business and an opportunity perspective. Okay, so one of the very simple tools that you get in any management, business, or economics course to use to kind of understand your current environment is called the PESTEL analysis. So what is the PESTEL analysis? It's just simply an acronym that looks at the different classifications of environments. So your political environment, your economic environment, your social environment, your technological environment, your legal environment, and your environmental issues. And so what we're going to do is take a perspective of what these environments look like from a global perspective. In other words, what's happening globally? How does that impact us regionally? And how does that then translate to our perspectives from a local perspective? So when we talk about the political environment, we are basically noting the fact that government policies and actions affect the marketplace. They affect the marketplace. This is something that we cannot ignore. When taxes are raised, when taxes are reduced, when new taxes are introduced, when labor policies are put in place, when interest rates, just like what happened earlier this week, are raised, and are planned to be raised every quarter by 25 basis points for the rest of the year and continuing actually into 2024 if you listen to the Reserve Bank governor. So we can already see that what it means is you will have a much higher cost to loans, and of course it means that you have a much faster currency growth that normally drives an inverse relationship between the value of your exchange rates and so forth. So it's important for us to understand what's happening in the political environment. The economic environment, of course, is all about economic performance. What's the general sentiment of the business players? Are they feeling bullish or are they feeling bearish? What are the key economic game changers? Like, for instance, if you look at South Africa, the explorations that are happening offshore, the discoveries that are there, what are the impacts that that would have on the economy? It's important for us to be aware of that environment. From a social perspective, understanding certain things that may impact your organization or your ideas or projects directly or indirectly, cultural trends, sentiments, specifically like what you're seeing driving right across the globe. So people might look at some of the issues around xenophobia in South Africa in a very narrow sense. But if you've traveled in the past 5 years, even pre-COVID, you'll find that there's been a very, call it left-wing movement that has taken over the globe, look at the Donald Trump era in look at what's happening from an Israeli perspective, and even far in the East with China and the general sentiment around labor migration, immigration, intercultural relations, and so forth. You also want to keep track of what's happening in the technological environment. We are on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, and why they call it an industrial revolution is because the rate of technological change is so rapid and so compressed that it is not viewed as a natural genesis, okay? And of course, the fifth industrial revolution, you've seen companies like Facebook change their names to Metaverse. You've seen Microsoft's cloud infrastructure taking on a different view with their artificial intelligence and robotic process automation, machine learning, and taking on a concept around Dataverse. Okay, the whole race with the hardware platforms and even the software players to drive a feasible and economic quantum computing framework, and what that actually does in terms of the ability to calculate permutations, predictions that we were currently not able to do with the current technology that we have. These are important things to be able to know and how they impact. From a legal perspective, things that pertain to local laws, things that pertain to regional laws, and as we deep dive into this, we're going to bring it home in terms of Africa. And what are the things from a regional perspective that are likely to cause our market sizes to multiply 4 times, 5 times, and even 1,000 times, depending on the industry that you're in. So it's important to understand those things that are happening there. And everything that we do today has to be done in a manner that safeguards the planet that we live in. So the green movement and the green revolution is something that you cannot ignore in any plan that you drive, whether within the context of your career or whether in the context of your business project. You have to look at how do I invest in processes and systems that are green compliant, because you may find that later down the line, that whole push may cause you to reinvest in aligning those things that you didn't align from the onset. One of the key things that I would want to prime at this point as we go into the discussion around the political space are a couple of things that we've seen globally. So the first thing that you'll understand is that when the Republicans lost the election and the Democrats took over, one of the very first things that Donald Trump did was he pulled out his troops out of Afghanistan, and of course we saw the chaos that happened there with the Taliban. But what is more important is the geopolitical statement that made to the rest of the world. And now when you look at it, when you talk about the Western Bloc, you are speaking of the NATO alliance vis-a-vis, of course, the 2 major players, China and Russia. And you can already see Russia's posturing with Ukraine. You can see China posturing with the islands off into the Pacific, even as far as islands that are more closer to mainlands like Japan and even Australia. And so capitulating in Ukraine has grave consequences for the world. Here's a key point. Ever since Russia amassed troops in Ukraine, your fuel price has gone up. So you'll probably say, what has this got to do with me? Well, you're paying for it. Every time you go to the gas or petrol station and you fill up your tank, just think Russia, Ukraine. As that war escalates, it's going to go above 100 a barrel. It's going to be more expensive. And you still see those AA reports saying next month it's going to be. It's linked to that. So it's important to understand what's happening around us. So that's a wonderful tool to look at. Now, when we look at environmental causes that create opportunity
and understand those environments is one aspect. There's another aspect to it, which is innovation. In the context of every organization, people are innovating. If you're not innovating in your technology, you're innovating in your processes, you're innovating in your product, you're innovating in your marketing streams, how you get your message out. Everybody is dynamic and changing and improving. Innovation is one of those key disruptors. Now, I know many of us used to remember the time when we had photographs taken from a camera with a little film that you'd send to the developers and they would develop that. That no longer exists. Why? Because the camera was introduced to the phone. And the phone has taken
budget, and I'm going out collect all the Hillsongs and so forth. Today, I haven't been there in months. And as a result of that, I've installed Spotify and I pay 60 Rand. I think I'm on the family plan. It's roughly about 100 Rand and I've got 6 users on it per month. If you ask me how much a single DVD or CD was, it was just about that 100 Rand. Now with that 100 Rand, I pay for 6 people, unlimited genres of music. And this has literally closed many DVD shops. Okay, so innovation has the ability to shift the way that the market operates. Absolutely important for us to understand how brands like Uber, Netflix, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Microsoft, Apple, and Tesla have shifted the game plan. In fact, Tesla today by market capitalization is actually close to the sum of both Toyota and GM put together. And that has happened over a very short space of time.
Now, one of the key things that has accelerated innovation and development in innovation is really particularly with the pandemic that we've come from. Currently, and why do I say come from is because I feel we are on the way out. There may be a new introduction, but we're actually on the way out. The natural genesis or life cycle of viruses is that at inception, they are highly lethal. As we develop immunity to it, the potency of those variants tapers. And that's what we're seeing, of course, with Omicron and Omicron 2 that has been discovered in Denmark. So here's another one coming as well. But what have we seen is that there's been a global disruption in supply chains. For the first time, cities like New York have supermarkets that have empty shelves. And for the longest time ever on record, the crime rate in New York has been the highest. It's escalated. So these are some of the things that you look at from a global perspective. And what is important is to interpret, okay, so what does that mean for me? And we'll get to that point. Okay. Another market disruption or disruptor that I want to talk about is market access. So you've got innovation, and innovation in itself has brought market access that was not there before. For example, you can now acquire stuff online as far as Alibaba or Amazon.com, wherever, globally, and have those things shipped to you in whatever country that you're in. All of a sudden, the retail platform has shifted from a local competing marketplace to a marketplace that competes globally. Okay, so access markets. Here's a key case study. with regards to China. China entered the World Trade Organization in 2001. If you look at the curve, China's curve, 2001 to pre-COVID 2019, you see that for those who do statistics, your trend line, your R line, if you just simply extrapolate that, is exponentially higher than both the European Union and the US and all of that stuff. Okay, so today, as of 2021, China is actually richer than the US. They've overtaken the United States of America as the richest country. And when we talk about richest country, we're talking about their balance sheet. Okay, so not necessarily just the GDP, but the net impact on the net worth of that country. China's net worth is greater than the US. And that was precipitated by an event that happened in 2001, market access. Market access. Market access has a great potential and velocity to shift the performance of any organization. So how does that apply to us in Africa? Most of us have been keeping our fingers on the pulse of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. What is this agreement about? Basically, this agreement is going to flatten the entire market of Africa. It's a project that has been birthed under the African Union. It has a specific set of people and a team that are responsible for making sure that every one of the member states finally puts their signature. Now, these are signatures as of 2020. I'll let you know that Nigeria has signed the ACFTA memorandum, and so Nigeria is now part of it. Okay, what are we expecting to see happen with this? This is going to lift over 30 million Africans out of extreme poverty. Okay. Now, post this, I will make sure that I send the World Bank white paper on this, because it goes down to a country level in terms of how many per country are expected to come out of abject poverty because there's now something that they can put their hands to do and participate in that market. Okay, and of course, over 68 million people will have their incomes boosted. This is a game changer for Africa. We currently are expecting that by 2035, that there will be an increment, an increment of 450 billion. This is in addition to the current revenue and income that is being generated within Africa. By 2035, there's new money of at least 450 billion. Okay, this to me is our African opportunity. This is our African opportunity to relive the transition and the transformation that we saw happen in Europe. We are at the doorway of this. We expect to see African exports increase by 560 billion, and mostly manufacturing. Remember, this is where our gap is. If you look at the content of what Africa imports, a lot of our product is manufactured product. We have the great opportunity to transition from prime industry, which is extractive, including farming, into manufacturing, which is a value addition of those extracted and farmed products. Okay, so of course, here's the interesting thing, that we're expecting that would have a direct impact on the wage gains, particularly for women. And this for me is exciting. And a definite 10.3% boost increase in the wages of both skilled and unskilled workers. Now, in order to support this environment where we have a cross-country, cross-nation, cross-region market, one of the things that's important is we need to figure out how people are going to trade, one. Two, how are they going to get paid? It's one thing to anticipate a market, but are there payment platforms and innovations or changes that are anticipated to happen that will govern and manage the movement of money? And actually, it's very good that I'm coming after the discussion on wealth management and how to use insurance and so forth. I think some of the big disruptions that are going to happen with this is how insurance is extended across national geographies, especially where funds freely flow between one country and the other. Here's a classic example: the Southern African Customs Union, or what we call SACU, which involves South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, and Swaziland. If you insure your car in any one of these and you drive across the border in any one of these countries, you are fully covered by your insurance in any one of the SACU countries. We expect to see that happening more pervasively as the ACFTA takes hold. So what are the things that we are going to probably see morphing? To be able to transact across these geographies, you need two pieces. You need the technology and you need the financial institution. You need the settling bank. You need at some point in time down that value chain for that money to translate into cash that you can pull out of an ATM or funds that can be debited or credited to a actual bank account. So what are we going to see morphing? We've already seen telecoms companies apply for financial services licenses. We've seen financial services companies launch telecommunications divisions. And what we're seeing is the morph between technology and access to the end user, because that end piece called a mobile device for Africa. Africa is the largest mobile device, the largest growing mobile device market on the planet. We grow in percentage terms larger than any other continent. Okay, so it is the tool to bank the unbanked. It is the tool that even the banked will use to interact with their bank. Okay, so what are we likely to see? We're likely to see a morph of telecoms and banking services, or more broadly, technology and banking. This is why counters like Time Bank are very relevant for our time, because they're shifting the whole approach to banking to drive it more from a technological perspective. I think Capitec did the same thing, and that's why they're able to charge much lower rates for their services. Of course, we're going to see a lot of shifting in central bank policy pertaining to movement of currency. I can see already, whether it's under SACU, whether it's under SADC, whether it's under East Africa Community, whether it's under ECOWAS, that the central banks beginning to put in place baseline standards on how inter-country settlements will be done under the ACFTA. Okay, for me, I would say the greatest win would be that those settlements be handled within the context of the continent. Sometimes as Africans, we tend to capitulate and go for the easier stuff. We want everything denoted in US dollars. Just to let you know, every US dollar account physically sits in New York. It's an account that's provisioned for you there. When you send funds to South Africa and the client or the supplier you're paying is banked with FNB. FNB has a what you call a USD account that sits under New York. Then your account is like almost like a sorting number. So it's a sub account under that account. Essentially, all the finances post World War II are managed by America. All global transactions are managed by America. These are some of the things that I'm glad as Africans we're moving in the direction that we are, because when we get to these bridges where we need to cross, we will ask ourselves some really fundamental questions in terms of direction of our policy. Okay, it might be the UN. Just to give you a perspective, China has been talking about their Trans-Asia, UAE, Africa highway, road and rail that they want to build to ensure that there's free movement of goods. That's a good thing and a very scary thing. The ACFTA is meant to boost African countries with their capacity by giving them a massive market that allows them to then invest in factory space, similar to what China did post 2001. When they had access to the market, they built massive square kilometer factories in order to address the demand. This is the transition that we're expecting to happen in Africa. Not that Africa now, under the ACFTA, now becomes a very big market for China to simply ship goods more effectively and efficiently. So these are some of the things that philosophically we need to make sure we've got our sides on the right side of the tracks. How about crypto? What and where do we see Bitcoin playing a role? What I'm happy about is, if you've been tracking in the past weeks on what has been happening with Bitcoin on the stock exchange, particularly in New York, is that it's been taking a beating of grandiose proportion. And the reason, and I think the fundamentals, if we kind of roll back with Bitcoin and crypto, it's almost like every unit of value that is exchanged must be backed by a real, tangible, valuable asset. In this case, the US dollar is backed by gold that is kept in a vault, that is independently verified, that this is the unit of value that backs the printed notes that are out there. Bitcoin, though you see the coin in gold nuggets next to it, the reality is that there's really nothing behind it that is independently verifiable. And so most stock exchange investors would call it the next pretty girl on the street. So you found when Ethereum came up, there were the pretty girls. Some of the big guys said, okay, this is a solid thing to go. The price of Ethereum shot up. And then when they made their money and they pulled out, the price of Ethereum crashed. Next person brings in their version of Bitcoin, and it's the next beautiful girl on the street, and it goes up and it crashes again. So it's these iterations of ups and downs that have made those who manage and run securities ask the question, Bitcoin should be made to conform to the same principles that any asset of value conforms to. In other words, what's the value behind it? How transactable is it? Can I go to any ATM, pull out funds, put in funds, and is it a means of payment that conform only the local laws, but the regional laws and the global laws? So the whole principle of anonymous payments vis-a-vis the whole banking ethos on know your customer, on FICA, on counter-terrorism funding are at exact loggerheads. And so what we're seeing now is a correction in the marketplace with regards to Bitcoin. What is the substance behind it? What is its transactability or transferability in value terms into other platforms? And where that doesn't align, the value attenuates. So will this be a platform to pay in the context of ACFTA? Perhaps not, but blockchain most certainly. So what is blockchain? Blockchain is just simply saying that the genesis of a payment and that payment coming from, for example, my account. So my account has $100 in it, and I want to be able to use that account, that $100 on a platform that is not related to my bank account, but I want to transact over here. What blockchain would do is it will simply translate the value that's sitting on a disparate system and be like an interface or an intertranslation into other platforms. So when you now get your value of $100 on Ethereum, there's actually a nexus and a connection to the value of that $100 into a tangible asset. This is why blockchain is and should be the foundation for currencies or cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Without that, it ceases to have value. What I suspect or what I anticipate to happen is that we are going to see more creative ideas around blockchain and more propagation of real value that's sitting in real tangible financial institutions into other platforms outside of Bitcoin that are trustworthy, that are transactable. Okay, so how is this going to impact our economies from a revenue perspective? Here's what is expected to happen to each of the countries that are under the AFCFTA. If you look at that red line, that's the cumulative total. Okay, so the expectation, I'll give you an example just on South Africa alone, is expected to grow by at least 24% in collections. So this means if South Africa's budget, which is I think roughly 1.2 trillion rand per year, that is expected to grow by 24%. There is absolutely no natural growth that can get a country of this size to grow that size. Currently, I think we had lost, I think maybe between 1% and 3% on our GDP growth. We are recovering now. We lost during the COVID time, and now there's recovery. But even our recovery, if you do a comparison 2018 and current year, you'll find that we're actually not growing. We're still coming back from a value that was less than that. Okay, so SARS and revenue authorities are going to have greater budgets. Government is going to spend more. There's going to be a more seamless flow of goods and people. There's going to be an exponential growth in market access. And there's going to be market normalization. What do I mean by market normalization? I'm saying that if the cost of maize was priced above the real market in South Africa, when these borders collapse and Tanzania or Malawi is able to produce bumper harvests, we will find that because of the ease of movement and trade, that those price disparities will become narrower and narrower. The space for arbitrage, the gaps are going to become narrower and narrower. Okay, so what is arbitrage? It's just simply saying there's a price distortion in this market, and if I exploit it in that market, I'm going to make more money. So what you'll find is that people constrict supplies over here, they export it across the Limpopo because they get paid in US dollars at a much greater rate, and you suffer because, you know, the market here doesn't quite demand higher prices. So those gaps are going to narrow as long as the borders begin to smoothen out. So this is big business talk. That's what's happening at a macro level. How do I benefit from this? What does this mean for me? What it means is you now have perspective of the bigger view. When you now decide what you want to kickstart, whether it be your business or your project, you have a view of where it fits in. You have an idea of some of the key accelerators. So let me give you an example. If I am starting a business or a project, I want to start a business or a project that is not only relevant for my targeted South Africa market or Zimbabwe market or Nigeria market, I want to build a business or service or solution that I can take to multiple countries. So all of a sudden, the way that I plan what it is I want to do takes a different perspective. I want to be able to build it in such a way that I can create customers across this large market. Some will say, well, it will take a long time. Let me tell you something, 10 years goes by fast. By 2030, it's either you'll be ready or the train or the bus, or whatever it is, would have gone already. So now's the time to realign your perspective, to refocus the value that you want to build, and move away from being a local hero. You've conquered the local market. The local market is great. It's time for you to understand that there are exponential growth events that are going to be taking place, and start preparing and shifting your organization, your business idea, your project to address that. Start small. Start now. Find your space to have an impact. I want to give you an example of one of these statements that we make in our organization. And I remember when I was invited to do a presentation with one of the revenue authorities within SACU, and the Commissioner General started the discussion by saying that he's tired of African companies, technology companies that come and propose solutions, and they really don't know what they're doing because African solutions don't really work. And so they're more inclined as a large organization to buy internationally approved and established solutions. And I can tell you my first 3 slides of my corporate presentation talk about why African solutions are unique. So I smiled. I started my presentation. One of the things that we pride ourselves in is the fact that because we have a unique environment. What's our unique environment as Africa? We don't have all the resources. We don't have fat internet. We don't have structured transport. We don't have payment systems. We don't have all of these wonderful things. We don't have pervasive skills across board. But in all of these don't haves, we've mastered the ability of Bura Makaplan. This means, this is an Afrikaner saying that says, Bura, you better make a plan. In other words, we've learned as Africans to define solutions that work within our constrained circumstances. I think that is a unique innovation, because when you build a solution, when you build an application for a cloud infrastructure that's in the US, with the way data flows and the richness and the thickness of the internet, you build thick applications. Then you have to propagate it to places like Africa, and then you have performance attenuation. But when you build it in Africa, you build it for a thin, constrained environment. When you put it in a global environment, it works 10 times faster. This is an experience and an innovation capacity that we have as Africans that we need to utilize. So find how you can have impact within an African context. There's a context that is unique to you, that if you innovate in that context, you can take that as a unique proposition outside. I look at the multimedia setup here. Rich quality, simple, portable, capable of being set up anywhere. That's unique. You try and do studio stuff in a different place because guess what? They've got money to buy the big cameras, blah, blah, blah. The whole, they'll need to rig. They'll need transportation. You have a uniqueness. We have a uniqueness within our African context. We just need to understand that the constraint is not a challenge, but it's an opportunity. Okay. Find those things that you are passionate about. Why? Because when you start on a journey of a project, a business, or even improving yourself, you will meet challenges. The only way to sustain what you're doing is keep it in the place that you're passionate about. Once it's in that place that you're passionate about, whether the money comes, whether the money is delayed, whether you have certain resource constraints, you will not easily give up on the project. Okay? Passion and calling at some point in time will meet with the opportunity. There is an opportunity that meets with the passion and the calling. For example, our own guy, Elon Musk, Cape Townian, passionate about physics and passionate about, really, does a rocket have to splash back on Earth with a parachute, or can we design it in such a way that it lands the same way that it took off? All the great physicists, including those that he called his heroes, said to him, my friend, you are talking nonsense. But because he was passionate about physics, he worked through it until he did it. Now, the Tesla rocket is the only one that takes off in a vertical position and lands in a vertical position. And all of a sudden, he's launched more satellites in a space of period than the entire US has ever done since the launching of satellites. And this is an individual company. So go in the area that you're passionate about. Stick to it. Stick to it. See it through. Preparation plus time and chance can cause a dynamic shift in your reality. When you are prepared and you meet the time and the chance in your preparation, it causes an impact that translates in high performance. I'll give you an example. We anticipated 10 years ago that revenue authorities would be investing in a certain type of solution to manage tax data. And we started to build the systems around that. We now have 4 countries that use our technology and or rely on our teams for support in those types of technology. We've been invited on countless occasions to present to different revenue authorities because we preempted the curve. Prepare, anticipate, time and chance will happen. If you're already in a business, understand where your exponential opportunities to grow are. It's not wrong or bad to redirect your business. So how do you do that? One of the key matrix that we use is the BCG matrix. It's the Boston Consulting Group matrix. Most of us know it. If I describe it, your cash cows, your dogs, your stars, your question marks. Kind of clicking now? All right. So basically, I'm not saying shut down your business when it's actually bringing you cash. What you are doing is you are putting that from a BCG perspective into your cash cow. But you must define your stars and your question marks. In other words, these are possibilities that could have exponential growth. And these are stars. In other words, I'm in a high growing market, but my market share is a little too small. So how do I extend my market share so that I get exponential growth? Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is reanalyze your business. Use either the BCG matrix to come and do a portfolio analysis of your business areas, and or analyze your industry using Porter's 5 forces model. It'll give you a good perspective of what are the dynamics within your industry. How do you create competitive advantage? And even greater, how do you create comparative advantage? Because these two are different. Okay, so on the basis of that, then you build a strategy. Tonito was talking earlier on about you've got to have a process to execute. It's worthless if you can build an idea, match it to where your market is, and then fail to execute. failed to execute. I was talking to my business partner and life partner, my wife, earlier on about an idea that we had with our media company in Zimbabwe. And this was before we sold our shareholding. It was the largest digital media, in-store digital media platform in the country. We had all the supermarkets wired with our assets that we paid for, TV, controlling the content, all the in-store merchandising basically was owned by us. And at the time, I sat with my two other partners then, and I said to them, I really feel we need to go into animation, build an animation studio. And they questioned it, and I presented over and over and over again. Eventually, because hey, there was money coming else from the digital advertising platform, it took a back burner, and eventually it never happened because I sold my shares and moved on at a profit, though. I was reading just a few days ago that Strive Masiyiwa is now an executive director. He's on the board of Netflix. In fact, he is pulled, I've forgotten the name of the animation film that was developed in Zimbabwe, is now on Netflix. And I kind of rewound and I thought, geez, I had this idea a long time ago. I know Strive personally. So him being there and having a Zimbabwean-owned animation studio, we could be pumping out Netflix animations in on that platform, left, right, and center. So what is the problem? Where was the disjoint? IDEA did not have an execution strategy, didn't have a process to take it, to make it come alive. Many of us have good ideas. What we are failing to do is to take it and operationalize it. It's now a couple of years later, and I'm looking back at that and I'm thinking, man, we could be making millions. But that opportunity has passed. There's an animation studio already that already has a platform on Netflix, courtesy of Strive. Opportunity, when it comes, must meet your preparation. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Have those processes thought out, written out. When the opportunity comes, you are ready to execute. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you and definitely open for questions. I hope you find your space in this massive market that the African continent is creating. Before we leave this world, I would like to make sure that we can proudly say that we have our own African Union, that people, goods, money can freely flow, and that the African continent itself has not made
fingers of one hand. When I talk about billionaires, I'm talking about the black ones, not the ones that still in politics, the ones that are in business. So when you think of people like Dangote, Masiyiwa, Motsepe, and so forth, we're talking about billionaires that are in business. We want to see what happened in China happen also with Africa. As the market is opened up to entrepreneurs, let's go out there and let's get our stake. Thank you very much.